Hey everybody, my name is John Bell, and welcome to another episode of the Harbinger Report. First off, I gotta apologize to a lot of my fans out there. I have been out of town for a long time and had a lot of other things pop up in my personal life that have set me back and prevented me from being able to upload a show for a while. I've had people emailing me, asking what's wrong, what's going on, blah blah blah, and I'm just sorry that life. I've had a lot of things come up, some crazy stuff, and I'm working on trying to move. So I'll keep y'all posted as those events go on. But sometimes life gets a little too hectic. Anyway, going on with the topic tonight. First of all, we got the solar storms that are coming in. That's a big topic right now. What's going to happen? Many people are suggesting they can cause a lot of power outages, shortages, et cetera, et cetera. Others are saying the globalists might use this as a excuse to use their own EMP weapons to knock out the power grid, as Carl Schwab and the World Economic Forum constantly talk about. They keep saying that's coming, and when they give us warnings about things are coming, you should pay attention because they're the ones that create it. So. Um, Moving on from that, the topic of tonight is going to be on exorcisms. Yes. Very popular topic in pop culture, if you will. And for those of you that don't know, I've got a background in military and law enforcement, but I left the state police to study to become a priest and spent a lot of time studying theology. I studied at Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio, which is one of the top Catholic universities in the United States. And John Paul II called it a pillar of the church. It's got some of the biggest name Catholic theologians like Dr. Scott Hahn, Dr. Mark Marivalli, Regis Martin. These guys that are at the top of their game. I also got a philosophy degree there. Which under some fantastic instructors as well. And I really appreciate my time there. Also, one class short of a minor in communications. And what class is that? The stupid intro course, which bites. Man, I was personal friends with the director of the department, but he happened to be on sabbatical right when I was getting ready to graduate. And the university was like, no, you got to come back a whole nother year in order to get your minor. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I was like, do you realize I'm going to Hollywood to work in Hollywood? You know what I mean? I'm like, come on, throw me a bone here. I've done enough. But anyway, going on the topic of exorcism, I've been very, very lucky and feel very honored and blessed to have known and spent some time with some famous exorcists and people that have performed exorcisms and in the church. And so I know a lot about the topic. I've assisted in minor forms. The last community I was with, the priest that was the head of that community was an exorcist, an official exorcist for the diocese. Um, I've known a lot of exorcists, and in fact, I'll tell you one story. Franciscan. My last semester, I was getting ready to graduate, and we had a priest that came in to give a class as an elective on exorcism. And man, I wanted to take that class so bad because I'd studied a lot on my own and stuff like that, read a lot of the top books, et cetera, et cetera. And so I ended up taking the professor out, who was a priest. I ended up taking him out to dinner one night and talking to him and telling him how upset I was I couldn't take his class because in order to graduate, my schedule was full with requirement classes, so I didn't have any room to, it was a conflict. I didn't have any room to do that. Um, but I took him out to dinner, and after spending the evening talking with this priest, this exorcist, about what I knew on the topic, he says, "John, man," he says, "relax." He says, "You don't even need to take my class." He's like, "You already know enough that you could teach my class." So that's what I'm doing now. So I'm giving a basic overview on some topics that involve exorcism. And this is a really, really important topic for our time. And the reason is because, the Bible talks about the great apostasy, all right, the time of the great apostasy in the church. And what that means is that a Christian world, a Christian country, is going to basically lose its faith and not be Christian anymore. In fact, it's going to turn its back on Christianity, on God, you know, maybe not on a superficial level, but on an authentic level. You see what I'm saying? And if you look at salvation history of the church, this is what happens over and over. And I believe we're in that time now, you know? Hold on. When I grew up, my entire family went to church every Sunday. I grew up going to church with my family, Sunday school, the whole 9 yards. Now, there's only a small group of my family that still even go to church at all, you know? And many of them are completely don't go to church or have taken on, I would say, more modern views. The church, Christianity is always going to be countercultural, and it is always going to be hated because it's countercultural. The spirit of the world goes is that culture that pervades, that takes over. And the church always stands at a stark contradiction to that. So it's always going to be in contrast with the spirit of the world versus the spirit of Christianity. All right. And I can tell you, in my lifetime, the US used to be very, very Christian, as in having prayer in schools, having crosses in schools, praying in schools and in government, and then having this whole separation of church and state, which is not the way that was written in the Constitution. Separation for church and state did not mean you could not have religion in schools and government. It meant that religion in schools and government would be protected. It's the opposite of the way that is preached and pitched today. It's the opposite. Remember, the signers of the Constitution were all religious. They all prayed and invoked and swore to God, even in the writing of the Constitution and in our prayers and the Pledge of Allegiance. So it shows you their heart. Now, like, all of a sudden, all these years later, we got to remove all that? No, that's the wrong direction. The wrong direction. And let me tell you, when I say that the church is always countercultural, the the movement we have going on in society today with immorality is a direct opposing contradiction ideology to Christianity. The two cannot coexist. One will destroy the other. Will. That's the plan. You might not see it. It happens slowly over time, like the boiling frog in the pot, but that's the plan. One's going to survive and one's going to die. And if you look at cycles of history, we're on the point now where Christianity is being killed. To the point, look, there was a bill they're trying to pass in Congress right now, and they're saying it would make part of the Bible illegal to preach in public, like in church. That's public, you know. Um, just because it offends people, what the Bible says. Well, I hate to tell you, the First Amendment and freedom of speech is the right to offend people. It's the right to offend people. You know, that's what freedom of speech is. That doesn't mean that means everybody has a voice, everyone has a say. It's not this culture we have today that's the cancel culture, where you say something that doesn't go along with the grain and you're booted, you're shunned, whatever. Anyway, those are some important, I think, foundations to kind of lay a foundation for the topic of tonight, which is exorcism. All right. So let's start off. What is exorcism? All right. Exorcism it's a specific rite that's performed of a blessing in the Catholic Church that is to remove uh, demons, and I say that plural because it's almost always more than one. Um, and that rite is to remove those demons from that person. Now, here's how it works. You and I are given a God-given right from our birth of self-possession. If you talked about like a saint or a holy person, you would say that's a very self-possessed person. It's one way to describe that. We're all called to be self-possessed. What happens in exorcism is that you through your actions, mainly through immorality and sins, you lose that right of self possession, because through the immorality, through the sins, what you've done is you've given authority of your self possession of yourself over to demonic entities that are always trying to get in. Remember, if you read the uh, the the the, the New Testament, it's full of people getting possessed all the time. You know, why are these demons always trying to possess people? Why is God always casting them out? Why the apostles say, "Oh, we cast them out in your name," you know, that kind of stuff. So what happens is there's different levels of possession, all right? And it goes from kind of just this isn't a perfect analogy. Everyone has a different way of explaining this, but just to break it down very simply in a digestible way, easy to understand. If you had a scale of like 1 to 10, all right? 1 is going to be temptation, which every single one of us have. And the last on that scale will be full out possession. All right. The that possession. All right. So now, of course, through that scale, you have a lot of different levels, all right, as you will, that have been kind of identified. So I would say it starts with temptation, which, like I said, everyone deals with. Then it goes to a deeper level that's called oppression. All right. Oppression can take on it's a difficult concept to explain because it can take on many forms. It doesn't have to be one specific route. But a lot of times, what you will see that happens in oppression, say you have here's just an example. Say you have a family that moves into a house, all right? And say that that house, they start having like demonic activity, especially usually centered around children. Why? The children are weaker. They're children. They don't have fully developed mental capacity yet, oftentimes, even teenagers, especially today. So that saying that it targets the weak. And what it'll do is, you know, say kids start hearing voices, they start seeing things in the room, things like that. You'll have things are moved around. You have it. This is a type of oppression, and what it's doing is it's attacking in a psychological way, causing fear. All right. And when it can find a way in, even including fear can cause that way in, then it will try to move to the next level. All right. That's only one example. I mean, there's hundreds of ways this can go. It's not always, it's hard to explain it because it's not always the same way, but you understand the basic principles. So the real start is oppression when it's demonic activity. Now, I always like to say temptation because we're all affected by that. But the next level is oppression, right? And oppression, it can be as simple as somebody goes into deep depression. Oh, you know, I used to love the world and the pretty horses and beautiful butterflies and the smelly daffodils. And now life sucks and I'm depressed and miserable. I need medication. I need to see a shrink. Oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking of killing myself. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. Not making light of people who suffer from that. I'm just saying. So that could also be a sign, you know, of these. That could be a sign of oppression. All right. The next level is called not oppression, but obsession. Like you're obsessed with something, but that doesn't actually apply. It's just the name, obsession. In obsession, a demon is already getting more control of you, but it's more of a from the outside kind of influence, the way I understand it. All right. They can take control of you for small periods of time, but it's still more of an outside thing. Then that leads to the final level, which is possession, where it's inside of you. And what it does is it takes over your free will. In fact, I've spoken to people that were possessed and had to go through exorcisms. In fact, I'm writing one down to remind myself. So they said it felt like in the possession that they were locked in a little dark room where they could not see. They had no control over their faculties. The demon took over their sight, their hearing, the smelling, taste, all that. the your soul at that point doesn't have access to those senses. It can, but but the demon can take over and can take fully over. The where another consciousness, another entity, literally takes over inside of you and controls you. Okay, that would be that. On a lighter level, it's obsession. On a heavier, full level, it's possession. The two are different. Possession is much stronger than obsession, but obsession leads to possession. All right. Now, the way people get possessed, the number one way that people get possessed is by opening yourself up to immorality and sin, sinful acts. That doesn't mean because you perform a sinful act you're going to be possessed. God still controls how that takes place, and to what degree you're allowed to be possessed. All right. And for whatever reason, God allows, I just remembered another one. God can allow the demons for one reason or another. Now, the scripture says you sin enough from God, God literally turns his back. He's like, I abandon you to your sin. You want to reject me? I reject you. And I abandon you to your own lust. I abandon you to your sin. Romans 1 talks about that. Also, it reminds me, King David in the Old Testament, he wrote Psalm 51, which is one of my favorite psalms. It's the Psalm of repentance, where he's asking God for forgiveness after Bathsheba, right? And he in that he says, "Oh Lord, do not turn your face away from me." Meaning, he's saying, "I know I've sinned against you, but do not reject me. Do not turn your face away from me. Allow me to repent, right? Or allow me to turn my heart back to you," kind of thing. So that goes again with Romans 1, where it talks about that separation. So some people that live a particular sinful life don't care about God, don't care about anything but themselves, really. Those will be classes of that can be abandoned to that. And one sure sign of that is addiction. Addiction is a low level type of of possession. Very low. It's not possession, but it's a low level type of that can lead to a high level type of that. For example, when you have an addiction, you are not self possessed. You are not self possessed if you have an addiction. That addiction, you have given up the right of self possession, and therefore you no longer have it. And it becomes a very hard fight and struggle for many people that deal with addiction to break that addiction over years and struggle a lot of times, oftentimes for a lot of people. And it reminds me, Jesus, when he spoke of Mary Magdalene, he said he had to deliver her of like 12 demons, or was it more? He had to deliver her like from a ton of demons, just because of the life she was living. And she was living the high society party life. And a lot of times people referred to Mary Magdalene as a whore. She was not a whore. She was not a prostitute. She did not take money for sex with men, but she was a party girl, and she ran in the party circles with the Roman elites, with the soldiers, with politicians, that kind of stuff. She lived the party life, and that's how she became so depraved, um, and luckily she turned to God, and God, changed that. So anyway, that's what exorcism is, the history of exorcism. So we hear in the Bible about people getting possessed all the time. All right. It's a common thing in the Bible, more so than you hear about today. It's not something that you hear about a lot in the general public. And even when there's cases in the church, they really try to keep the subject on the down low for different reasons, that they chose or feel is best. But I tell you this, I went to a Catholic school, we had a lot of kids that did missionary trips, right? To like South America or to Africa. And I tell you what, you see possessions going on there all the time, like straight out of the Bible going on. All right. It's not like here in the US. And the reason why is it's not that we have it any less in the US. We probably have it more than they do. The problem is our way of seeing evil and God. We don't believe in it as much here. There, where faith is actually stronger amongst people and villages, then you see the demons acting out in a stronger way, and thus possession will be a lot more common. It's here, but the demon doesn't want to show itself, it wants to hide, and so it doesn't reveal itself often to the public. All right. So when it comes to the subject of exorcism, one thing that's extremely important to point out is this topic is wasted on you if you do not believe in hell, or if you do not believe in evil and demons and the devil, and if you do not believe in God. All right, the both are real. God is real. God is 100% real. All right. Part of the reason I do this is because God spoke to me directly. All right. It's called a direct locution. If you see God, that's a apparition. If you hear him but don't see him, it's called a direct locution. All right. Um, so I've had times where God's spoken to me and showed me things, and that's part of the reason why I left being a soldier and a police officer to go study to be a priest and a monk. It was for those reasons. All right. And part of the reason why I do this show now and why I'm trying to get these subjects that I do on my channel in an entertaining way, but giving you truth at the same time. All right. So God is 100% real, and the devil is very real. And it's easier to see the devil than it is to see God because we can see so much evil in our world. But if evil is real, then good is real too. And that means God is real. And if the devil's about evil, God's about love. Real love. You know what I mean? Now, that doesn't mean it's unconditional love. God does have unconditional love for us, but we choose whether or not we're going to serve God or love God in our own choices. And we choose to abandon him or not through our own decisions and our own choices. God wills that every single person is in relationship with him and goes to heaven with him. But sadly, that's not the case. In fact, in the book of Mark, no, Matthew, it states that wide is the road to hell, and many are those who enter, and narrow is the road to heaven, and few are those who make it. Right? So the Bible teaches, that's high level theology, that more people go to hell than go to heaven. And part of that is because of the culture. That's not hate speech. That's fact. It's reality. We're not all in a relationship with God. And a relationship with God isn't something that's subjective. Oh, I just feel like I am. That doesn't mean jack. You have to know you are, and that means you're following the 10 commandments. You're following the basic things to have relationship with God. The Bible says that anyone who claims that they're in relationship with God and don't follow the 10 commandments is a liar. Because what God requires for us to be in relationship with him is that we strive to follow the 10 commandments. That doesn't mean we always succeed, but we strive to do that. And when we do wrong, we recognize that we've done wrong. We recognize that we're sinners and we ask for forgiveness. All right, all that is just laying the foundation for the topic of exorcisms. Now, in the history of exorcisms in the Old Testament, we read about this in the Bible about people getting possessed. Jesus cured people of possession in the New Testament, and then further on, we see later on with the apostles that as Jesus gives power over the apostles and sends them out to speak instead of him, he started off giving the missions and speaking, and then later on, Jesus sent the apostles to go do the same job. All right. And he would send them out two by two and ask them to give an account of what they did. And they came back and said, hey, We were even casting out devils in your name. Well, right there, it shows a clear thing from Jesus casting out devils to the apostles casting out devils. Those apostles are what created the Catholic Church and created priests, bishops, etc. And yeah, I apologize for some. This is going to be slightly a little Catholic centric, only because it's the Catholics that are the experts in exorcisms. In fact, I'll give you a case of fact of that one right now. Boom. The movie The Exorcist. The movie The Exorcist was based on a true story. I don't know how many people know that. It's becoming more common knowledge now, but a lot of people didn't know that back in the day. Um, but yeah, The Exorcism was based on a true story. It was not a little girl, it was a little boy. And I'm going to show him to you soon. It was a little boy. And the little boy, his parents, when all these crazy stuff was happening, they were Protestants. They took him to their Protestant pastor, and the pastor thought, oh, the kid's just being a kid, right? They were like, let him stay at my house, and let's see if this silliness goes on, right? So what happens is the kid goes and spends the night at the Protestant preacher's house, and he was sleeping in like a reclining chair, and the chair was like spinning around and like coming off the ground and stuff. And the, the minister goes back the next day and is like, okay, you can have your kid back. Thanks. He's like, I can't help with this. Sorry. He's like, bring him over to the Catholics. He's like, the Catholics know how to deal with this stuff. And that's true. So that's why I'm going to be dealing with a lot of this. Plus, my knowledge and experience with some famous exorcists. And so I will get into that. But the first thing, I'm going to cue up the sounds of hell.
The Soviet Union drilled a hole more than 12 kilometers deep in Siberia, which shares borders with Norway and Finland. The project to drill into the Earth's surface began in the 1970s when Soviet scientists wanted to learn more about the Earth's crust. Over 2 decades, they managed to dig more than 7.5 miles down into the Earth. The drill broke through into a cavity, and the scientists lowered some equipment to see what was down there. An extremely heat-tolerant microphone, along with other sensory equipment, were lowered into the well. The temperature was about 1,100 degrees centigrade, about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But the real shocker was the disturbing sound that was recorded. They only got about 17 seconds of audio before the microphone melted, but it was 17 horrifying seconds of the screams of the damned. The screams of the hell.
So yeah, that was a story I'd heard back when I started college, and what had happened is, yeah, they dug this hole in Siberia. That was the way the story went in Russia, and they would stick microphones down there to make sure they weren't hitting certain gas pockets that could destroy their equipment. And so they sent this really high heat microphone down there. And what they heard freaked everybody out. I mean, it was just very chilling sounds um, that they heard down there. I'm gonna see if I can cook just the sounds.
The Soviet Union drilled a hole more than 12 kilometers deep in Siberia, which shares borders with Norway and Finland. The project to drill into the Earth's surface began in the 1970s when Soviet scientists wanted to learn more about the Earth's crust. Over 2 decades, they managed to dig more than 7.5 miles down into the Earth. The drill broke through into a cavity, and the scientists lowered some equipment to see what was down there. An extremely heat-tolerant microphone, along with other sensory equipment, were lowered into the well. The temperature was about 1,100 degrees centigrade, about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But the real shocker was the disturbing sound that was recorded. They only got about 17 seconds of audio before the microphone melted, but it was 17 horrifying seconds of the screams of the damned. The screams of the hell.
That's creepy. When I was younger, I looped that and listened to it like again and again, trying to hear as much depth in as I could. And wow, I mean, it's layered, really compact layered. I mean, you can hear like thousands of different voices in there. It's really something, and it always made the hair on the back of my neck like stand up. I mean, this was something creepy, scary, you know. So anyway, the reason I just wanted to start with that is because I just wanted to show that just give a taste, just a little touch that hell is very real. And I always say this: you can't fight a war that you don't know you're in, and we are born into a spiritual battle. In fact, the Catholic Church calls this the church militant, the earth. It's the church militant, where we're at war. We're born in a war between good and evil, light and darkness, that goes on from the history of the world all the way to its end. And things are on an escalating scale where they're getting higher and higher. All right. But anyway, so I briefly described what exorcism is. Most people have a basic idea what it is when someone gets possessed by a demon or demons, right? I talked about the history of it. It started in the Old Testament. Well, it goes beyond the Old Testament, but that's where we hear about it. We see that Jesus did it. We see that it was passed on to the apostles that did it. The apostles passed it on to the Catholic Church that does it. And to this day, they still do it. The Catholic Church performs exorcism. Now, it was a bigger thing back in the old days. Then in more modern times, it pretty much died out for the most part. Little stories here and there. There were quietly, every diocese has an official exorcist, but it was kind of quiet on the down low. In recent times, there's been a shift in that. More and more seminarians in Rome are getting trained in exorcism. More and more seminarians are taking courses on exorcism so that they have more of an attention, an awareness of this. I can tell you this one story. When I was in college one time, there was a priest that would interview students, just basic interview stuff, and he was interviewing a student, and all of a sudden the student started acting like possessed, and the priest about peed on himself because he had no understanding or concept of what this is or what was happening. It scared the living crap out of him. You know, he went to other people that knew more about what it was and what they were doing. All right. So I mentioned the stages of exorcism. So you've got temptation, which we all have. You've got oppression. You've got addiction. You've got obsession, and then you've got possession. All right. It's like a 1 to 10 scale, actually, but those are the various levels on that scale. And people can be anywhere in between. Now I'm going to play a video later, but one priest that's a famous exorcist today says that he believes that 10 to 15% of the general public suffers oppression, demonic oppression, and that 25% of the general public suffer obsession. All right, which is right before possession. All right. Um, this man is the expert, not me, but I would think that in today's society, those numbers, I believe, I would argue, are much, much higher than that. I think we've got members of Congress that are 100% possessed. They're not possessed in a bleh way, but they're possessed in a they sold their souls to the devil, and that's who rules them way. That's possession. All right. You don't have full control of yourself. You are now a slave, and you have to do the master's bidding. Welcome to slavery. That's possession. All right. Another word for possession, slavery. See, if you're a slave, you're a possession of someone else, not yourself. And everyone has the right to self possession. All right. So you get how that works. All right. Um, so exorcism in pop culture. All right. So I already mentioned the movie The Exorcist, right? Um, it was a big movie, and I think it came out in what 1973. All right, the movie The Exorcist, and it blew the country away. It had big storms, and in fact, people that saw it flipped out. All right, um, it was a heavy movie in its time, and made a big impact, and a big impact on pop culture. Even to this day, it's a household name. People are familiar with this movie. Now, in this movie, you have a little girl who is acting out as the possessed. Right, these are things they did a very good job with the movie all the way to the end. The end was horrible, but they did a fantastic job with the movie up until the end. Um, Here depicted in the movie, you see the little girl levitating off her bed, and she levitates high. Okay. That is something that is recorded. I've studied cases in the church of recorded exorcisms, and some of the higher level this isn't normal level exorcism. This is rare, extreme level exorcism. But in these exorcisms, they are reported to be able to levitate, not just themselves, they're able to levitate furniture, like the entire bed. All right, heavy beds, heavy objects. They're also known to do contortion, where you see the little girl turns her head all the way around backwards. That creeps the hell out of everybody, including myself. That's contortion. All right. Here's another example. The girl's back's bent over almost completely. You see in The Exorcist, little girl walks up and down the stairs backwards, so an upside down. That would be examples of that. Now, psychologists in the early days called this hysteria. And whenever you had cases of possession, they called it hysteria, as psychological cases of being out of your mind and being able to do these crazy things. But I don't know how it could someone who has hysteria is levitating themselves or beds off the ground. Now, in the movie, this was based on the story of a little girl, Reagan. In this movie came out in what 1973, I believe. Now, that said, the true story was about a little boy, not a little girl. It was a little boy. And the way the little boy got possessed is he was playing with the Ouija board. All right. Little Parker, what is it? Mattel Ouija board. All right. Fisher Price, whatever. My grandmother gave one of these things to a cousin of mine at Christmas one time just because she was grabbing a toy off a shelf, and I took it away and I said, "Oh, hell no." Uh, when you do things like the Ouija board, you're opening yourself up to the spiritual realm, and you're inviting things in. You're giving. See, one thing about demons is they're very legalistic. All right, they're very legalistic. They have to follow rules and laws that God puts in place. But they're masters at subjecting those and bending, they're finding loopholes, if you will, in the laws. All right, or entrapping you. Okay. Now, when you get entrapped, 9 times out of 10, you should have known better. Playing with a Ouija board or being involved in other occult activities, witchcraft, Wicca, Reiki, all that kind of stuff, that is subjecting yourselves, paganism, hedonism, that is subjecting yourselves to demonic activity, demonic forces, and you're inviting these things into your life. You're inviting them into yourself, and there is the potential for uh, oppression, addiction, obsession, and possession. And you don't have to be going to be possessed. A lot of times people are possessed. They don't outwardly show things. The demon hides, but it still controls you, and it can still take over your will. Um, So the true story about the boy. Boom. So, Exorcism of Roland Doe, the true story behind The Exorcist. In 1949, priests performed an exorcism on a boy referred to as Roland Doe, aka Ronald Hunkler, in a chilling ordeal that became the real life inspiration for the movie The Exorcist. All right. So, yeah, it happened in the 1940s in the United States. Um, Here's just more about it if you want to go into inspired novel that inspired the movie. This was the early priest, Father E. Albert Hughes. Um, was the first priest that attempted to perform an exorcism on the boy. So yeah, so the way the story goes, like I was telling you before, what happened is you have the parents are Protestants. They took him to the Protestant minister. The Protestant minister said, "Oh no, I can't handle this. Take him to the Catholics." They took him to the Catholics and they got this priest, and this priest tried to perform an exorcism on the little boy. Problem is, the priest didn't know what he was doing. Not not everyone knows or has training in exorcism. And sadly, many priests don't know anything about exorcism. Sadly, there's many priests that don't even believe in hell. Just ask Francis, he'll tell you that. He makes statements about that. Ooh, I like to think of hell is empty, he says. Really? Really? Okay. Anyway, just ask your chief in Rome. They'll tell you something very different. And so will the Bible if you read it. I already talked about the book of Matthew. Get some. Anyway, so this priest, like I said, he didn't know what he was doing. When you're involved in deliverance or exorcism, you better doggone know what you're doing or you're going to get hurt. All right. That's not a joke. That is real life. And that's what happened to, I got to get my hand right in the camera. This guy right here. All right. He tries to perform the exorcism. Well, he didn't know what he was doing. The demon who was tied up to a bed reached inside the mattress, like tore a hole in the mattress of the bed. That's pretty strong. Grabbed a spring, because it was a spring mattress, pulls it out the bed, broke its restraints on one side, stabbed the priest in the shoulder with the spring, and sliced his arm down open. All right. And that priest, basically ran out hollering and didn't want to have anything else to do with it. So the bishop then sent in two other priests. That brings up an interesting story, too. I don't know if I should bring it up now. I think I'll swing back to it. Just remember, I'll swing back to this moment. But that brings in these priests. So more help arrives. William, I have trouble reading small. Man, I was saying this name all day before getting this. Bowden Bowdner. All right. He was a chief priest. He and his partner, I think this is actually a better picture of Bowdner, but that doesn't look like the other guy. Anyway, okay, I can read this. A cousin of the family was attending St. Louis University at the time of Roland's struggles, the little boy. She put the Hunklers in touch with Father Walter H. Howleran and Reverend William Bowdern. I struggle with that name. Bowdern. All right. I don't know. It's kind of like a tongue twister for me. Bowderner. Father William I want to say Bowden, but it's Bowdern. He was the chief exorcist. The other was his assistant. All right. After counseling with the university and the parents, the Jesuits, they were Jesuits, performed the exorcism with the help of several assistants. What they did was they brought him to a hospital. It was here, St. Louis Exorcism. The Alexian Brothers, that's like a religious order hospital in St. Louis, where Roland Hunkler, aka Roland Doe, or Robbie, was treated. That's where the exorcism was performed in one kind of closed wing of a hospital at this place. They also had a lot of nuns there that were helping them. It was at I think it was at St. Louis University where the hospital was. But anyway, where the community was. Anyway, they are the ones that performed the exorcism. Here's a modern or not modern now, because I don't think he's still with us, but here's a later image of Father Bowdner in his older age as the priest that fought the character that inspired the movie The Exorcist. All right, and here's the boy. All right, this is what the boy looks like as a more of an adult, and on the right side, it's what he looked like when he was younger, and they were performing The Exorcist on him. All right, they shaved his head. And I think he was in a hospital gown too, and restrained in this room. But this is this is a picture of the actual boy as he was older, and the boy in the hospital. Um, the boy, in the course of the exorcism, did in fact convert to Catholicism, and um, furthermore, it was through the intercession, that the actual historical account of this possession. It was through the intercession of Saint Michael the Archangel that actually freed the boy from the possession. Saint Michael the Archangel is known as the Prince of Heaven and the Chief General of God's armies, and the basically number one person that Christ sends under the authority of Jesus to fight Satan. And it goes back to that whole tale of how Lucifer fell from heaven, kind of thing, and it was through Saint the battle between Lucifer and Saint Michael. All right, and what's amazing about that is um, Lucifer said that he wanted to be like God, but he wasn't. But yet the name Michael means one like unto God, one like God. So Michael, in his humility and serving Jesus, actually achieved what the devil wanted for himself, but couldn't have, because of the way he tried to go about it, essentially, which is amazing, because even the Bible says that God makes us, those that get to heaven, just almost like gods. I mean, almost like gods. You know what I mean? Which is insane that Lucifer wants to put himself above God. I mean, that's just I can't imagine that type of hubris. Anyway, so that's the movie The Exorcism. So getting on to the next one, we got The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And if you haven't seen this movie, please go see it. Or wait for like Halloween or something. This is a scary, scary movie. But it was brilliantly done, because even though it was pitched as kind of like a horror movie, it really is like a courtroom drama, like CSI or NCI or one of those. You know what I mean? Which is brilliant. In fact, I went to a special viewing of this premiere of this movie in Hollywood at the ArcLight movie theater. That is where they do the red carpet events all the time. You got the ArcLight movie theater here, and then down the road, you've got the Chinese theater where Star Wars was first released. All right. Those are the two theaters where they do all the movie openings. And most of them are right at the ArcLight off Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. All right. I lived there. I worked in Hollywood for a while. All right. And so that said, I was very fortunate to meet the writer directors that made this movie. And it was a collaborative team of what did I just do? It was a collaborative team of two writers. Sorry, I had to get myself back. It was a collaborative team of two writers and two directors that co-wrote and co-directed this movie, Exorcism of Emily Rose. And I got to meet them in person, and I was very excited. And I got to speak to them and ask them a few questions. And it turns out, of the two, one of them, I don't know if he's an atheist, but he's a non-practicing kind of non-believer. The other one is a Protestant Christian, and that decided to do this film. This film's amazing, and again, it's based on a very true and very real and very creepy, but also yet very beautiful, beautiful story. All right, now I'll share why. Okay, Exorcism of. Hold on, let me see if I can enlarge my screen to read this better. Okay. Um, okay, yeah, move that out the way. So her real name, I had a thing blocking her name. Her real name is Anneliese Michel. Okay, and she was German. She was Dutch. Okay, and you can see this picture down below what she looked like in her kind of possessed state. She was a beautiful little girl. Annalise Michelle died in her family home 1st of July 1976, age of 23. For the previous 10 months, she went through more than 60 sessions of exorcisms, 60 sessions of exorcisms to rid her body of the demons, it's always more than one, said to have taken possession of her. After refusing food, drink, through a belief of atoning for her sins, the young Annalise succumbed to malnutrition and dehydration, which that killed her. That's what it means to succumb to that. Um, was it a true demonic possession or a medical disorder that afflicted her? For more like this, check the paranormal guide where I got this, I guess. So, um, that gives you an idea of the truer story. This is a closer up picture of her in her like more transient state. Here's a picture of her normal, and then a picture of her in her. So you can tell she looks very emaciated here. Oh, wrong one. Switch back to the Exorcist. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is show you a clip on Emily Rose, and you're gonna get to hear her possessed. Scary.
Ja, ich will auch für die anderen leiden, damit die nicht in die Hölle kommen und so. Aber dass das dann so schlimm ist und so grausam und so furchtbar, nee. Das tut mir leiden, das ist so leichte Sache, aber wenn es dann wirklich schlimm wird, da will man überhaupt nicht mehr, da will man kein Schlimm.
Ihr Klötze. Nein, ihr Klötze. Und mal mir Klötze. Oh, so gerne will nicht. Oh, ich gerne nicht.
Sind wir schon 3?
Ah, wie. Was ist so eine Scheiße?
Als Kind Gottes.
Ich hab dein Maul erschlagen.
Namen des Vaters.
Ruhe gibt's nur da oben.
Ruhe gibt's nur dort, wo die Liebe ist.
Ja, bei uns gibt's nur
Nur Hass.
Ja,
Und wo nur Hass ist, da gibt's keine Ruhe.
nein. Und für uns gibt's nie Ruhe. Nie.
Weil
In der Ewigkeit. Und jetzt bin ich verdammt. Die müssen in eigenen Seminaren ausgebildet werden, die dürfen nicht auf die anderen Universitäten. Kapiert?
Klar. Ist da sonst noch etwas zu sagen?
Oh, weil es ist, weil.
Weil der Teufel größere Macht.
im Namen deiner seligen Jungfrau, im Namen Jesu, befehle ich dir auszufahren. Im Namen des dreifaltigen Gottes, des Vaters, im Namen des dreifaltigen Geistes
Nein,
befehle ich dir auszufahren und nie
weißt du, Maria, voller Gnade.
Yeah, so that's pretty creepy. So that was all in German. She was Dutch, so that was German. And they were claiming when it was flashing the different names like Cain, Judas, Lucifer, Nero. They when an exorcist performs an exorcism, it's very important that the exorcist find out the name of the spirit that's causing the problems to the person. Because once they get the name, it gives them power over. It gives them a power to target and get rid of. There's power in the name. So they always try to seek the name. So those are the names that the demons were giving them of who it was that was speaking through her, who was actually possessing her at the time. So that's what that was about. And that's common stuff. You don't usually often see like the big highlight names like Judas and Nero that persecuted the first real persecutor of the Christians back in the day. Um, or Cain, is a Cain of Abel, my brother's keeper. Cain killed Abel, and then Judas, and then Lucifer himself, supposedly. So now demons lie too, but in the course of exorcism, the priest was commanded, in the name of Jesus, I command you to give me your name. And like I said, they've got to follow legalistic rules. So when the priest commands them in the name of Jesus, they have to explain more of who they are. All right. And then that then gives the exorcist is going to want to know how the person got possessed, because that's a way of treating them. Once you know what it was that possessed them, a lot of times curse food. You know how we, as Christians, we pray over our food, and that's fine. But I always do this. I don't pray when it's in the kitchen or being made. I pray when it's sitting in front of me, and I pray over it right here, right in front of me, before I put anything or consume anything in my mouth, even if it's water. All right. I pray over anything I put in my mouth. And I've read many cases of possessions where because people were possessed by cursed foods. When I was a state trooper, we got reports from the feds that drug dealers, and especially like the drug cartels, were using Satanism and Satanists to curse the drugs, so it would become more addictive to people, because they're not just taking the drug, they're taking in demons. All right. And that gets them more addicted, then they buy more drugs. See where it's going? So those are real reports I got when I was in the state police, that Satanists were at the cartels were cursing the drugs before they were brought into our country and illegally sold to our people. All right. For that purpose and that effect, for demonic possession, for addiction. All right. For those purposes. Um, Also, I heard recently, I've heard this multiple times, but I heard it again recently with people in the film industry saying that when you go in high levels of the film industry and some of these high record towers, they literally perform satanic rituals off of albums before they release them to the public, and you listen to them on the radio, especially like gangster rap kind of stuff, where it just talks about just horrible, evil crap that is not good for anybody. You know. So, we talked about The Exorcist. We talked about Exorcism of Emily Rose. So now one of the things I want to talk about is, well, I'll talk about some of the priests that I knew that were exorcists. And please say I did not put them in the wrong category, because that would be bad. Oh, no, I'm good. All right. So when I was young, I did several trips to Medjugorje and became friends with this priest right here. This is a very famous priest named Father Ken Roberts, and he wrote a book called Playboy to Priest, because he was like a big party guy and had a big conversion and ended up becoming a priest. Well, he later took a lot of trips to Medjugorje And I ended up going on one of those trips with him to Medjugorje. And in one of the trips, just before my trip, and man, this kills me, kills me. The trip just before the trip I went on, they brought a seminarian who got possessed. I'm like, man, I wanted to be on that trip, you know? Get it? Like, anyway, so the story goes they brought a 90-pound little seminarian, and they brought a high school team of like football players. So they were, they were big, tough kids, high school football players. Well, they all go to Medjugorje. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Medjugorje is a place in Yugoslavia, and it's an apparition site where they claim that the Blessed Mother is appearing there to children, like happened in church history at Lourdes and Fatima and Akita, Japan, and different places like La Salette, where the Blessed Mother has a whole history of appearing to people, and giving messages to little children. And this is one place that claims to have done that. I've been there 3 times, and ask me if I believe it. I had my conversion there. Like, I wasn't even Catholic until I went there, and the Blessed Mother spoke to me, and that's what made me decide to become Catholic after she spoke to me. Anyway, this isn't my story, so getting back to Father Ken Roberts' story, I love this guy's smile. That's his characteristic smile. He passed away a few years ago, and the world's a darker place. He was a good guy. But anyway, in the story, the football kids, they weren't taking anything religious or seriously. They were drinking and partying the whole time they were there. And and they didn't have much in the way of chaperones, really. Even Father Ken was sleeping at a different house. Well, the seminarian kid, the little bitty seminarian, the one who was taking it serious, he gets possessed. And he starts chasing all the football players around with a kitchen knife. And I'm talking like a big kitchen knife, not like one you cut a little piece of butter with. You know what I mean? He's chasing all the football players. It took all the football players to hold down this little 90-pound tiny seminarian. Dude, I could hold a 90-pound person down with one hand, like without even cracking a sweat, And it took all of this group of football players, all of them, to restrain and hold this kid down who still had the knife in his hand. One of them ran and woke up Father Roberts at his place that he was staying with his host family. And they said, Father Roberts, you got to come over here. The devil's over here. The devil's over here. And he's like, hey, I can smell in your breath. Y'all been drinking. And they're like, yeah. But the devil's over here. You got to come. Come on. So he goes in there, and sure enough, he says the first thing he realizes, and this is very common, is that even though it was like very warm, hot, and humid outside, the minute he steps in this room, he could see the frost from his breath and noticed how frigid and cold it was. That is a sign. That's a heavy sign. All right. Demons require a lot of energy. All right. So they take energy from things, even like batteries and cameras and things like that. It's common that they'll go to zero because they're sucking up energy to manifest. Right. But anyway, sure enough, the kid's acting out. Father Roberts is like, I don't know what to do. And one of the kids says, oh, I saw The Exorcist. The kid's possessed. And he's like, I know what you need to do. You need to go get some holy water. And Father Roberts is like, I don't have holy water. One of the kids says, you're a priest, man. For God's sakes, go in the kitchen and make some. And he's like, oh, yeah. So he goes in the kitchen or bathroom, and he starts blessing water to make holy water. He was saying that he was so scared from this incident, his first time experiencing something like this, that he was like having trouble just remembering how to say a prayer. Like he was struggling, right? He'd have to start and stop and say, but anyway, he blessed the holy water. They went and put it on the kid. The kid freaks out. And the kid freaks out from that. Eventually, by morning and praying over the kid and throwing the holy water on him, which does work, the kid ended up going back to normal. And then Father Roberts got him help with other professionals. And Father Roberts went to talk to some experts, exorcists, to try to figure out what was going on. And if I remember correctly, he met with an exorcist in New Orleans, which is right down the road from where I am right now. And the priest told him that that was an obsession, not a possession, an obsession. See, there's a difference. A possession would take like maybe weeks to get rid of, whereas the obsession, they were able to knock it out in pretty much a night. When I was in Medjugorje, possessions were pretty common. It would be nothing that you would be sitting praying in church, and this guy next to you starts going, and people are like, we got another one. It was like that normal there. And I'm like, what the hell you mean? We got another one. What the hell's wrong with you people? But they just pick him up like they're nothing, and they're all, and they just carry him outside the church, put him on the ground, and usually I'd see a group of little nuns praying over him. It was just normal. One time I was in church praying there, and this woman right to my right, sitting next to me, she starts wigging out, right? And I'm like, what the hell? I could distinctly hear like four distinct voices coming out of her mouth at the same time. You can't fake that. You cannot fake that. Four distinct voices that were arguing with each other coming out of her mouth next to me. She's sitting right next to me. And I'm like, what the? Okay, I'm scooting over, I mean, but that was normal there. I met another seminarian there, and his name was Damien, like the movie Damien, like the devil Damien, son. And this seminarian named Damien got possessed, and I met him there, and he told me his story. He was a seminarian. You will find that seminarians will get possessed more sometimes than the general public. And why is that? It's just like I said in the beginning of the show. You will find more possessions in Africa and other countries in South America than you will in the US. It doesn't mean they have more demons than we do. It doesn't mean they're better or worse than we are. The demons here hide. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to be manifested. But when you're closer and stronger in your faith, the devil resorts to stronger and more overt tactics. And that's when you see the exorcisms or possessed people, rather. All right. You see more of that. And that's why you find a lot of seminarians are prone to getting possessed. Because the devil is trying to last ditch effort to scare this person away from being a religious or spending their life dedicated to God. That's why. It doesn't mean they're bad people. Now, they might have done stupid things that open themselves up to it, but it doesn't mean they're bad people. And sometimes even holy people, even saints, can get possessed. Case in point, I'll give you a story of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, a household name, whether you're Catholic, Hindu, Buddhist, or Muslim. Mother Teresa, who I love, she was a great and very holy woman. There is a story I read about an account where she went into a hospital and was getting medical treatment. She was, older age, so it was common. And the local bishop, was also an elderly man and was in the hospital getting some treatment done. He heard that Mother Teresa was there, so he decided he was going to go pay her a little visit. Well, when he met with her, she wasn't very nice. She wasn't very kind. Now, if you know anything about Mother Teresa, that is very, very unlike her character. She is always sweet. She is always kind. She always has a smile on her face, no matter what's going on. So the bishop realized that she was not herself. All right. So the bishop calls up one of his priests on the phone and says, hey, I want you to come down to the hospital. Oh, and bring your rite of exorcism. Yeah, they've got a book of prayers. It's called the rite of exorcism. So, I have a copy of it. So he's like, yeah, I want you to grab your rite of exorcism and come down to the hospital. You need to perform an exorcism. And the priest is like, okay, on who? And he's like, oh yeah, it's on Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And the priest is like, what? He's like, I'm not doing that. And the bishop's like, you have to. I put you under obedience. I'm ordering you. You have to do it. And the priest is like, okay. So the priest went and performed a rite of exorcism on Mother Teresa in the hospital. Now, that was actually used as a part of her canonization process to become a saint. Sometimes God um, gives allows rather the possession, even in a holy or saintly person, as a means of participating in the sufferings of Christ, if you will. It's a mortification, it's a suffering, but it's a suffering offered up to God for the salvation of souls. See, God allows us to be able to be partakers and share by pure gift, mystery, pure gift, to share in his sufferings on the cross. And it's a mystical and beautiful, amazing gift. And this is something that is well spoken about and taught in the lives and history of the saints. If you read Butler's Lives of the Saints in the church, and you will hear phenomenal story after story after story after story after story from all of history that's pretty much lost to the modern times, just lost. In fact, side tangent real quick, Ignatius, I'm no fan of modern Jesuits, I'll tell you that. But I am a fan of the early Jesuits before they were corrupted. And the founder, late Saint Loyola, all right? Uh, Loyola was a military war commander, all right? And he was a brave, tough as nails, commander soldier in war, respected both by his own command and by his enemies, all right? He got wounded by a cannonball hitting his leg in a battle, and he was considered to be such an honorable and great military leader that his own enemies carried him home wounded. And when he got home, he went into a big depression because he's basically crippled. He could walk, but only with a limp now. And he was crippled, and he wasn't this strong, tough military leader anymore. In fact, he couldn't even serve in the military anymore. And he kind of went into a depression back at his house. Well, his family happened to have a book on the lives of the saints. So he started reading through those. They inspired him so much, specifically the story of St. Francis of Assisi, who's a phenomenal saint, one of the greatest, if not the greatest. um, um, on that level. There's different levels. But that said, so he was extremely inspired by these saints, and especially St. Francis, so much so that he decided to go become a priest after that. And he became known as St. Ignatius of Loyola and became the founder of the Jesuits. And his initial model was to model himself, excuse me, after St. Francis of Assisi. Um, and he went on to become a powerhouse, and the early Jesuits were some of the baddest, best people of their time. I mean, it's the North American martyrs that basically colonized the U.S. Those were all Jesuits, and if you know anything about the North American martyrs, you don't get people on planet Earth that were tougher than those guys. They were tortured to death by Indians, and they were hardcore. They were hardcore. It was a Franciscan priest that colonized the southwest of the United States, and it was the Jesuits that helped in the colonization of the northeast of the United States, in particular. And if you go up to the northeast in the U.S., there's still remnants of that today. I was in Michigan, and you had Bishop Barriga, who was a Jesuit priest up there, who was a tough as nails guy that spoke French and introduced himself um, to the Indians up in the Northeast, and taught them to speak French, and taught them Christianity and Catholicism. I got to hold his chalice that they still have today that he used to say mass with, which was a great honor for me. But anyway, getting back to the story. So yeah, Saint Mother Teresa had to had to go through a rite of exorcism. Okay, so I talked about Father Ken Roberts and his story of a famous case of possession. Now, I went to Franciscan University, and Franciscan University was almost almost entirely created from Father Michael Scanlon, TOR. Um, Father Michael Scanlon was a phenomenal priest, and he also a famous exorcist. He was my spiritual director for a short time when I attended Franciscan University, and he was a phenomenal person. I only wish I could have spent more time with him um, than I was able to. But he gave, I was in the pre theologate program there, which was young men studying to be priests. And we lived in a household and had a formation program, morning and evening prayer, et cetera, schedule we had to follow. Father Scanlon came and gave us a talk one time and told us about his experience being an exorcist. And he gave us some interesting stories and explanations about exorcism that were really good. One is this: his first time experiencing exorcism was he was a parish priest, and a woman. It's very common for parish priests to be counselors and people to make appointments with them for counseling, spiritual direction, that kind of stuff. This woman made an appointment with him, but she goes in there and she starts wigging out, right? All possessed. Well, Father Scanlon tried to exorcise her, but the demon laughed at him and said, "You can't, you don't have the authority to kick me out. You have to have the bishop's authority." Technically, in the church, in the Catholic Church, all exorcists have to have the local bishop's blessing in order to perform the exorcism, because ultimately it's the local bishop, which is a modern day apostle of Christ. If you take the original 12 apostles of Jesus, all right, there's an unbroken line of those 12 apostles to all the Catholic bishops of today. In fact, when you become a Catholic bishop today, you receive paperwork that's a lineage that goes back to one of the 12 apostles, the original 12. And you have a line, a lineage of bishops, apostles. Jesus told the apostles to create more, to pass it on, and so that the work would continue. And that's what they did. And so every bishop today can run his line back to one of those 12 apostles of Jesus. All right. So Jesus came and banished the 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 demons from in exorcism from the possessed. Then he had the apostles do it. He told the apostles to make more apostles to continue it on down the ages. They've done that. So even today, this the bishop that has the authority to give to the priests that are the exorcists, that are their role is exorcism. That's what they do. Every diocese has their own exorcist, and that's their job for the diocese at that time, or at least one of their jobs. So Father Scanlon said the demon laughed at him and told him he couldn't remove him because he didn't have the bishop's permission. He says, "Hold on right there." He ran to the bishop, asked for the permission from the bishop, and the bishop says, "Better you than me." Better you than me. He runs back and he blesses the woman and says, "Get out," and boom, the demon left. That easy. That easy. All right. But anyway, that is kind of a partial rule. Now, there are rules, but there's also exceptions to the rule. What if you're not a Catholic and you've got a demon to deal with? I'm going to get into that a little later. That's called deliverance, and there are lower forms of exorcism that are not performed by priests most times. It's called deliverance, and a lot of churches do them. When I was younger, there were deliverance teams all the time. The Catholic Church has kind of frowned on that a little bit in recent times, because people were getting hurt because they didn't know what they were doing. You can put yourself up to a bad situation. Now, if you stay to the end, I'll explain the tricks to that and how to get around that. All right. Now, I'll also quantify the gift Exorcism is when you get ordained a Catholic priest, you have to go through, I think, four levels. One is the first level is acolyte. I'm an acolyte. I serve the priest in my mass. That's an acolyte. Okay, on the altar. That's acolyte. Exorcism is another level of formation for priesthood, and then deaconate, diaconate, and then ordination of the priesthood. Those are the four kind of tenets you go through. So exorcism is supposed to be in one of those tenets, and they still have to have the blessing of the local bishop. But what I'm saying is these are offices by God, but God also gives spiritual gifts to different people. Sometimes God will just give the gift of exorcism to a particular person because that's the spiritual gift God has given them. We all have spiritual gifts, and the idea is that we all use them to serve each other. All right. And then we're made whole and strong. Some have the gift of prophecy. That's me. Some have a gift of understanding tongues. Some have the gift of healing. Some have the gift of, all kinds of different spiritual gifts. Some are a gift of exorcism. All right. Um, there have been particular religious, not even priests, that were very strong exorcists, and without even really trying, it was just a gift God gave them. Um, but I would highly warn. In fact, I'll give you a story about that. So Saint Francis of Assisi, who I spoke about a little bit ago, he had he had a brother in his community known as Brother Juniper. And Brother Juniper was kind of like an oddball. All right. He's kind of like how would you say? He's kind of like Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. He was the odd man out. But yet, even though he was the odd man out, he was kind of the one that was always right, even though everyone else was wrong. Kind of, it was weird. But Brother Juniper was kind of a hippie little carefree, oh, I just love the world kind of guy. And he was just a pure-hearted and holy person. He saw things very different than you and I or normal people would see things. And sometimes his behavior like really scandalized or upset people. But he was a very holy and pure-hearted person. And there's a story that there was a possessed person, and they brought him to Saint Francis of Assisi, one of the greatest saints that ever lived. And and Saint Francis commanded the demon to leave, and the demon says, "Nope, I'm not leaving." And Saint Francis says, "I command you to leave," and the demon's like, can't do it. I'm not leaving. Too bad." And Francis says, "Okay, fine. If you refuse to leave, I'm going to ask Brother Juniper to come in here." And the demon says, "Oh, no, 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 no. I'm going. I'm gone. I'm gone. So I'm sorry to bother you. Have a nice day. I'm out." True story. And it was just, he was so pure and holy, they couldn't stand to be around him or in his presence. It like brought them pain. Like, they said that if demons were coming down the street and on a possessed person and Brother Juniper walked down the other side of the street, the demons would all flee. That's just the old, what we call small teacup tradition, small T tradition of stories of St. Francis. But I will say this as a warning. Do not try to get rid of demons from a person unless you really know what you're doing. And that doesn't mean you think you know what you're doing. That means you have training and you really know what you're doing, because you can open yourself up to a lot of physical danger. In fact, going back to Father Michael Scanlon. So he told the story about how oh, well, you know what, I guess I'll tell you the story about Father Michael Scanlon real quick. So Playboy magazine had a list of the top party schools in the United States, like LSU down the road from me. And one of them was Franciscan University of Steubenville, where Michael Scanlon became the president of that university. He single-handedly changed. I think it was like number 3 or number 6 on the list of top party schools in the country. Like, not something like conducive to Christianity, you know what I'm saying? Or morality or drawing close to God. Well, Father Michael Scanlon became the president of the university, and he single-handedly changed all that. He changed the school until where he became a very holy and fantastic school. All right. And made it what John Paul II called a pillar of the church, you know. So anyway, getting back to so that's his story. Um, so he's really credited a lot, but he also became a famous exorcist. He's noted in books for his roles in performing exorcisms. I know of an exorcism. I know two exorcisms he performed. One right before I got to the university. I'm always like a day late and a dollar short, and it was involving one of my close friends I grew up with. And then there was another exorcism while I was there of a boy that I brought to him, although I wasn't there when it took place. And I guess I could go into those stories, but first, Father Scanlon gave us a class on exorcisms, and I told you he told us that story about how you needed the bishop's blessing. Well, another story he talked about is this: when you deal with a possessed person, you have to absolutely know and have the confidence that you are speaking in the name of Christ and with the power of Christ when you are dealing with this demon. All right. In the single minute that you start feeling like you're losing that grip, it's time to stop and get out, because that's when you will get hurt. That is when you will get hurt. And look, we're all human, and no one has to play like, "Ooh, I'm, super badass." It's not like that. These things are scary. When you deal with these creatures, these demons, and they're clever, they're intelligent. They're more intelligent than we are a lot of times. That's why you got to be the church has very specific rules for interacting with the demons. You really don't want to get into conversations with the demon. The demons are smarter than you are, and they know more than you do. So you're not going to win an argument. It doesn't work that way. You're not going to win an argument. And they can try to trap you in a cycle. They're going to play a psychological game with you, you know? So it's best to avoid that as much as possible. You can ask questions, but the questions are very poignant and direct for a specific reason and purpose. Not, you don't want to engage in conversation. And if it tries to engage in conversation, you ignore it or you cut it off. You don't go down the trap. If you go down the trap, it's going to trap you. You see what I'm saying? Just like when you're in a courtroom, you follow what the attorney's leading you to, it's a trap. Don't follow the attorney. Don't follow the direction he's leading you. Same thing with these demons. You got to be very careful. Now, there are things the priest is going to want to know how the person got possessed, because that gives them power on how to undo it. And they're going to want to know the name of the spirit that's possessing them, because that gives them authority, or they can take authority over the demon. So it's a fight to get those things, because the demon's not stupid. It knows that. But eventually, if you fight enough, the Lord also intervenes and makes the demon talk. In fact, there are times where the exorcist can make the demon tell the truth about things, like Jesus is the only God, and that loving him is the only way to heaven and forgiveness of sins and all that. And you can get them to tell the truth sometimes. But you have to be careful, because they mix truth with lies, and it's a dangerous path. The best is just to avoid conversation with them altogether. You stick to, and here's a great example of that. When Jesus was tested in the desert, tempted by the devil in the desert, notice the conversation. The devil kept trying to lead you. First of all, the devil showed up not saying, "Hey, I'm the devil. I'm here to kill you." No, the devil's like, "Oh, I'm your friend. I'm here to help. Oh, you need some water? Oh, you lost? The path's over here." It always comes as a friend, as a helper. But you go down that path and you're screwed. All right. The devil was trying to get Jesus involved in conversation instead of Jesus. The only person that could outtalk the devil was trying to teach us what to do, even though we weren't even there, but he knew it'd be written down and recorded for us to know. All right. So Jesus gave us an account of what took place with the devil. And even Jesus, he doesn't get into a conversation with the devil. When the devil tries to get him in the conversation, Jesus only quotes scripture. That's what he did. It's a weapon. It's a defense. It's a shield. He did not engage in a conversation. He only quoted scripture. All right. And that's an important point to make. and it's relevant in exorcisms. All right, it's very relevant in exorcisms. Do not engage in conversation. There are specific things to focus on and ask for, but other than that, you keep it short and to the point, and you don't allow conversation. Um, one little trick the demons are going to try and do is start telling everyone's sin in the room. Any sins you've done and tried to hide, the demon will start throwing it all out there in the street for everyone to know. um, so it's often good. Priests are recommended to go to confession and do a good confession before going in to be with the priest. In fact, going backwards a little bit, remember earlier when I told you, if I can find it, remember when I told you earlier on, whoa, why am I struggling to find it? Okay, so this was the first priest brought in to exorcise the boy that inspired the movie The Exorcism, right? Well, he didn't know what he was doing. He didn't know how to perform exorcism, and he got hurt. Okay, so then they got Father Bowden to come in and perform the exorcism. He was a much older priest than this young man, all right, and was an experienced priest. Now, in the rite of exorcism, and like I said, there is a rite of exorcism, and I have a copy. It spells out that you want an older man, an older priest, that's more older and wiser and has had more experience. You don't want to just throw young people in there. You want people that know what they're doing and know their faith and are a little stronger in that for to be dealing with the demons. Another thing they will often do is it will make good confessions. Like I said, big confessions. You're taking away ammunition from the demon by doing that, and you're cleaning yourself out, trying to get yourself as clean as possible. And they will fast. The rite of exorcism asks you that you fast from food and water, and only on water, no food, for at least a day, if not a couple of days, in preparation for the spiritual warfare. Remember, in quoting the Bible, Jesus said some demons require much prayer and fasting to remove. Okay, much prayer and fasting. So, an exorcist, to perform an exorcism, should prepare himself with prayer, with penance, with the rite of confession, the sacrament of confession, rather, and even fasting. Okay, to clean themselves out and get them ready and strong for the fight with the demon. That's how it's done. Now, so Father Michael Scanlon told us that. Now I'll tell you the story of the exorcism he performed. So I had a friend I went to college with here in Louisiana, State College, um, where I was studying criminal justice to become a state trooper, right? And I had a friend there. My friend there went on to go to Franciscan University. Now, later, after being a trooper, my buddy left the university, and as soon as he left, I left the state police after a number of years, and then I went to Franciscan University to study to be a priest. All right, and so I switched positions with my buddy. Well, the semester, almost a semester, a year beforehand, when my buddy was there, one of the people in our household, it was called a pre-theologate, people studying theology, um, that for priesthood. We lived together in a household of men, separate rooms, but we had a household of men that and formation and stuff like that for studying to be priests and formation. Well, one of the seminarians got possessed. Okay, and I think it was the roommate of my buddy that was up there, and they were I don't know, they were in the main chapel on top of the university. And my buddy tells the story, and he said that this possessed kid takes the tabernacle. Now, the tabernacle is what we hold the consecrated host of Jesus in the inside the tabernacle, and it's metal, and it's usually very large and extremely heavy. Even my friend told me that his roommate, the seminarian that got possessed, picked up this giant tabernacle of metal. I mean, giant tabernacle made of metal and threw it at somebody. Luckily, the person got out the way, but this is a young kid really. And he picked up a very large, heavy piece of metal and just chunked it like it was nothing. And they had to go call Father Scanlon, the who was the president of the university at the time, that came and performed the exorcism on the boy. Now, we say exorcism at this point, it more than likely was obsession versus an actual possession, where obsession you can pray over him and get rid of it. Possession could take weeks to months to really get rid of, and those are more extreme cases. Now, another case that happened. Oh, that was the same case as this, or is it another one? There was another case in the pre-theology program. We had a new priest. It was Father David Testa at that time. He left and retired. A new priest named Father John Cody took over the pre-theology program. That's when I came on board. But right before I got there, Father John Cody, his first time being a priest running the pre-theology there, he had a seminarian that got possessed in front of everybody, started wigging out, right? And a lot of times and I told you, seminarians can be more susceptible to possession than most normal people, and not because they're bad, it's because the devil is using stronger tactics to try to prevent these people from being religious and giving their life to God. He's trying to scare them and others, right? As if that works. I mean, that does the opposite. That just makes me want to go to God more, man. If I see some demon walk in, I'm gonna be like real religious. Please help me, God. Please help me, God. Please help me, God. Get rid of that thing. You know what I mean? Like, it's the opposite. But that's how stupid the devil can be. Like, he outsmarts himself. Anyway, so there was this seminarian got possessed in front of everybody as well, and I believe the whole reason why the Lord allowed this to happen is he was trying to show the new priest how serious this program actually was, how serious it was, and that's why God showed it, allowed it, and had that happen. And that was right before I went. Then I went there after that, and yeah, nothing happened while I was there, because I was there. No, I'm kidding. No, we actually had one kid, and I was involved in this. Um, One of the first kids that were kicked out of the university. I had a hand in that because it was a kid in the pre-theology program, and he was the one that started acting out at times with the obsession, and started doing crazy stuff or saying crazy things, scaring people. And we took him to Father Scanlon and we asked him to perform an exorcism on him, and he did. But Father Scanlon came back and said, I can't get rid of the demon. And we asked why. And Father Scanlon said, because the boy refuses to let the demon go. See, this boy was very insecure. It was a very introverted, insecure person. He didn't have any confidence. And the demon made him feel strong and made him feel confident. And so he thought, the demon told him, if you kick me out, you're not going to have any confidence anymore. You'll go back to being a scared little kid. And so because of that, the kid refused to let the demon go. And Father Scanlon said, if he refuses to let it go, there's nothing I can do, because it'll come right back. He's like, I can get it out, but it's just going to come right back to him. And so ultimately there's nothing I can do. So at that point, I recommended that we ask the boy to leave the university. And that's what happened. He got kicked out. So it's a shame. It's a sad tale. It's a sad case, really. You would think people would come around, but no, people do make deals with the devil, and that's something else we'll come to later on. Now, after I left the university, I joined a religious order with this man. This is Father Benedict Joseph Groeschel, CFR, Franciscan Friar of the Renewal out of New York City. All right. Father Benedict Groeschel had a PhD in psychology. All right. He was a super intelligent person. He was an academic. At one time, he had an eidetic memory, which means he had a photographic memory. All right. He could read that entire book and tell you every word, what page it was on without, having to look at it again, could quote the whole book to you. All right. That's how intelligent this man was. This man absolutely was a very holy and loving man, good friends with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She helped him start his order that I was in for a short time. Um, and I'm very privileged and honored to have been able to spend time with this holy man and know him, as well as others. But anyway, Father Grishel was the chief exorcist for the Diocese of New York City for over 15 years. All right. So that means he knows a thing or two. He's seen a few stuff. All right. I'll tell you some wild stories. Oh, and by the way, when I was in his community, we had some low level demonic activity pop up. And guess what? Happened to me. To me. Didn't know who was messing with. No. So yeah, we in this community we served we were I lived in the Bronx, 142nd Street at Broadway in the Bronx, all right, Harlem. Not the Bronx, Harlem. Well, I guess Harlem in the Bronx. In fact, while we were there, they filmed Carlito's Way Part 2, and they used our like little monastery or our house as a changing room as they were filming on the set outside in the street. They had this funny scene where all these like religious brothers were trying to go up to the director and say stuff to like bring him to God or whatever, Christianity or whatever. And I went and they were like, John, you talked to him a long time. What were you talking to him about? And they were expecting me to say, oh, yeah, all this stuff about bringing him to God and Jesus. And I was like, I was asking him about how to be a good director. And they were like, man. But anyway, when I was there, we would spend we ran soup kitchens and took care of homeless in New York. And so we were in the inner city and the noise and the hustle and bustle. And man, when I say noise, holy cow, like you could not get to sleep till 4 a.m. because that's when all the hooping and the hollering from all the night parties going on and just the building right across from you. And it's so hot. Everyone's got their windows open. It's miserably hot. I mean, it was a nightmare. It's like living on planet Mars after growing up in Louisiana. I hated New York City. But anyway, so we would go spend we would go spend a couple of days out of the month going to Monticello, New York, which is upstate northern New York, and it's in the woods, in the wilderness. And we had a retreat center where we built hermitages, and we would go stay in a quiet place in these hermitages. And I stayed there one night, and I was in this room, and I just felt this really creepy, uneven feeling. And I don't know what you call it. I'm sensitive, right? Like there are many times I see dead people, if you will, right? And I don't see them with my eyes. I see them with my mind. Like I feel their presence. And I don't see anything physically, but spiritually, I mean, not even spiritually, just in my imagination, man, I could draw a sketch of what I'm looking at or what's there, but I can feel it. You know how you ever feel like someone's just there, someone's just watching you, and you turn around and there's someone there? Well, it's like that. It's like that. Well, I was in my room and from my window, I just felt this presence and it was dark and it wouldn't go away. Like I have this little discernment, like I'll leave the room and forget about it and just completely out of my mind. I come back and boom, it's right there again. I'm like, all right, this is not my imagination. Something's going on. Yeah. And I just felt creepy. I didn't sleep well. And I got this image in my mind of an American Indian. Half his face was painted red and black. He had a mohawk and he had jewelry all over his face and his nose, his ears, all kinds of stuff. Chains hanging down. Like I'm saying, I could draw a sketch of this person. And he was just standing there at my window doing this at me. Like it just had complete evil intent. And all night it was like that. I just felt very uncomfortable. And I prayed and tried to ignore it and not let it get to me, even though I knew it was there. And I got the feeling that that spot that we built the retreat center on was a battle zone between like frontiers people of the time and a Mohawk Indian village. And of Indians, I'm part American Indian myself, Cherokee. And of the Indian culture, their understanding of religion is very different than us. So when it comes to holy people or medicine men in Indian tribes, they can go to the light side or they can go to the dark side. They can go to kind of occult pagan worship, or they can get connected with the Great Spirit. You know, you find all the extremes in Indians just on their choice of they choose to be, et cetera, et cetera. Some Indians are extremely holy people, and some are very dark and evil people. And this I got the impression that an Indian tribe was wiped out in a battle there, and these were not good Indians. These were very dark, like murderous, just hate-filled, angry, demonic spirit type of person. And that's what this was I encountered. Now, I didn't make much of it. You know, we left, and then the next time, and I told everybody about my experience because I'm kind of a talker, if you haven't noticed, whether people ask me to or not. And anyway, so I leave. They still tell me I'm famous there for all my stories when I was with the with that crew. They're like, "Yep, you're still famous." But anyway, I told everybody about that story, and they all laughed at me. They thought I was being stupid. They didn't believe me, you know. But the next time we went on retreat there, which we did, like I said, once a month, we'd go spend like a few days up there, and it's just to get away from the noise and the hustle and bustle and spend some quiet time with the Lord, which is always a good thing. We need to do that. I need to do that more and more. But anyway, that said, we went back there, and this kid Barry came to me. Now Barry was from Ireland, and unlike the Irish, because I'm part Irish too, I'm more Scottish. That's why I got freckles and light skin. But anyway, in my hair, you see this, you see all this, they call it gray, but it's white. All right. This was all red. I had black hair, and I had like jet black hair, and I had a straight red beard. I mean, red beard. All right. But all the red turned to white. Not cool. But anyway, so this kid Barry comes to me, and he was an kind of an immigrant from Ireland that decided to join our community. And unlike the Irish, who are some very go-lucky, happy, joyful folk, Barry grew up on a farm, and he did not have a single cell in his body of humor. I don't get along with people like that, just so you know. And they certainly don't get along with me. In fact, I'd say hate's a good word. But anyway, Barry says, "Oh, I want to stay in the room you were in," and everyone starts laughing. They heard him say that. It was out in front of everybody, and they're all laughing. "Oh, Bell, Bell, ton of stories, whatever." So I said, "Barry, I'm telling you, I don't mind. I was going to take that room just because I didn't want anyone else to be subjected to what that happened there. I can handle that stuff. A lot of people have no experience with that, and they can't handle it." So Barry says, "No, I want to stay in the room." See, Barry thought I was full of crap, is what he's saying. And so he wanted to prove it by going to stay in that room. So everyone's laughing at me. Barry, I'm like, "All right, you have the room." So the next morning, we're at breakfast. Everyone's eating like cereal around this big, long table. And I said, "Barry, how'd you sleep last night?" And I was sitting straight across from, just by chance. I mean, I wasn't trying to, but he was just straight across the table from me. And everyone at the table started laughing because immediately they're like, "Oh, here goes Bell," right? And Bell's BS. But Barry, who, like I said, doesn't have like a single funny bone in his body, he just says, he's eating his cereal, and he's like, I said, "Barry, how'd you sleep last night?" And Barry goes, "Not very well." And then you could hear a pin drop on that table because the laughing went hushed. And there was a new priest with us, and he was like, "What are y'all talking about?" And they were like, "Oh, Bell said that he had he's like demonic attacks in this room the last time we stayed here. So Barry wanted to stay in there last night." And the priest, he says, "Oh, no. He says, Bell's right. He says, Bell's right. He's like, we've had other seminarians that stayed in that room, and they said they had very similar experiences." So all of a sudden, everyone's like, "Oh crap, you mean Bell's right?" So you know what's crazy? That night, 2 seminarians woke up they had like really bad nightmares, enough that they woke up screaming. 2 seminarians in 2 different rooms woke up screaming that had the same scary dream. All right. They were so scared, they both got up. They both woke up the priest in the middle of the night saying that they were scared and what happened. All right. And they both had the same freaky dream and went and woke up the priest. Right. So the next day, the priest decides, hey, Bell, what should we do about this? And I'm thinking, I'm like, dude, you're the priest. What are you asking me for? You know what to do. But I was like, okay, you're gonna ask me. I'll tell you what we do. So we did a holy hour. We processed the Eucharist around to every room. We prayed. We threw out blessed salt, holy water, and we prayed the St. Michael chaplet. And boom, nothing happened after that. And then we went and talked to Father Benedict Groeschel the next time we saw him, and we told him what happened. And he's like, oh, we were like, the devil's messing with us at the retreat. And he was like, oh, what happened? He said, the devil's like a dog on a leash. People wonder why they get bit if they get too close. That's what he said. But he says, what happened? Did he make things fly around? And we were like, no. And he says, well, did he speak to you? Did he say anything? And we were like, no. What he was saying was scaring us more than what actually happened. You know what I mean? It was funny. Anyway, Father Groeschel told us some stories about his experience doing exorcisms, and some of them were kind of crazy. And I'll explain like one of those to you. He was called to the house that there was activity going on with the little girl. All right, little girl had everything flying around in a room. Like you ever seen the movie Poltergeist? And everything's flying around in a circle in a room. Father Groeschel said that when he opened the door, he almost got hit by a tube of toothpaste that flew by. And look, the old tubes of toothpaste were metal. They weren't like the plastic we have today. So I mean, that could hurt you. Anyway, so he performed his investigation, and you know what he came to realize? The parents sat down with him and said, so is our little girl possessed? And he says, no, she's not possessed. And they said, well, do we have a poltergeist? Like, you know, the movie Poltergeist? And he says, no, you do not have a poltergeist. And they said, well, Father, what is it? What's going on? Why is everything in our daughter's room flying in circles? And Father Groeschel said, it's your daughter. It's your daughter. She was telekinetic. She had the ability to make all those things fly around in a room. And she even had the ability to manifest something that would look like a demon or a shadow person and stuff like that. And he said the way he fixed it was he told the little girl she couldn't have Christmas anymore, that Santa wouldn't go there and give her gifts if that stuff was going on in the house. And he said, boom, it all stopped. It all stopped, you know. But Father Groeschel said he experienced 2 cases that were like that. One was like, you know how you punch holes in a wall? Instead of punching holes in a wall, there were holes that were punched out of the wall from the inside. That was in another case like that. So there's some crazy stuff out there, and things are crazier than most people know or most people are aware of. But anyway, those are some of the famous priests that and some of their stories that dealt with exorcism. I'm going to show a few clips now. Well, actually, I'm gonna cover. Okay, so when it comes to exorcism, I already talked about how what Catholic priests do to get ready for exorcism. They go to the sacraments, and when I say the sacraments in the Catholic Church, the sacraments are like going to confession, going to mass, receiving the Eucharist. Uh, and then they fast. All right, in preparation, they do a lot of prayer and fasting. So the church has given us, and the Catholic Church that gave us the sacraments, and the sacraments are a way of keeping us on the right path and in the right graces with the Lord, and they're gifts that the Lord gave us that have become a part of the church. Those are the sacraments. Like confession is a sacrament, going to mass and receiving the Eucharist is a sacrament, going to church. All right. Now, there's below that, you have blessings, and the priest can give blessings. The exorcist can give blessings. Those blessings have weight. They've got power behind them. Okay. Other than that, then you got what's called sacramentals. Sacramentals are things like um, a cross or crucifix. Okay, is a sacramental. That that's a sacramental. We get these blessed. It's almost like a cult version of a talisman, right? Um, but we get these blessed, and we believe that they have power, and they do have power. Also, holy water is a sacramental. Okay, so these things they work on demons. You know, people might not believe in the Catholics or the Catholic Church, but I tell you, doggone what, when it comes to exorcism, these things work, and they're proven to work for centuries. Centuries. Sometimes on one sign of possession is you throw holy water, and it can not only can they have a visceral reaction, sometimes they'll break out in sores and like burns from just drips of a holy something that you and I could drink, you know, but you put it on them and it's like you burned them, like real, you can see burns, right? That's not a small thing. Demons know if I held up a crucifix or cross, or even the demon can feel if it's been blessed by a priest or not. If it's not blessed by a priest, they don't care. But if it's blessed by a priest and you use that against them or touch them with it, they will go crazy. They cannot they go crazy. Same with the holy water, you know? So another very powerful sacramental that's used in exorcisms and in the church are rosaries. Is the Holy Rosary. All right. It's also sacramental, and it's a powerful weapon and tool. The saints call this a weapon. Saint Padre Pio called this a sword, called it a weapon um, that God often refers to. And these things have stopped armies and wars. That's not a joke. I listened one time to a bishop that talked about living in the Soviet Union at its worst when they were killing Christians and Catholics and outlawed Christianity. And the bishop said the only thing that kept the church alive was the rosary. That was the only thing that kept the entire church alive during the worst times of persecution. And then when they opened the doors to the church again, as they have now, the church is filled to the brim. Like they don't have enough room. And they said all of that was because of the rosary. All right. Very powerful. Another sacramental, holy salt. This is blessed holy salt. And you will find a lot of times in exorcisms, holy water and holy salt is used. Also, crucifixes are used that are blessed, and rosaries. Another thing about this crucifix is that is called a Saint Benedict medal. It has two sides. That's one side, and behind the corpus of Jesus is the other side of that medal. Now, the Saint Benedict was known. He was a saint that created Western monasticism, created monks. All right, Western monasticism monks in history. He lived a very long time ago, and he created this medal known as the Saint Benedict medal, and it's always been known. It's got an ending. It's got a I don't know exactly what you call it. It's written out with words that spell out different prayers. And it's been known to be a very powerful tool against demons and possessions. So that's your main sacramental tools. Holy water, blessed salt. Sometimes one trick, pour some salt in the water. Then when you throw the water, the water goes away, but the salt stays. And then, of course, crucifix, and then the Saint Benedict medal as well. Very big in exorcisms, and then the Holy Rosary. All right, those are very important. Now, I'm going to show some clips, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more about how do you perform a deliverance, do's and don'ts. All right, after we see some of the experts speak, and one of the number one experts I'm going to be quoting from is the man that wrote this book, Father Chad Rippinger. Okay. Now, I do not know, I have not been blessed yet at this point to have met Father Chad Rippinger. He's one of the greatest exorcists in the Catholic Church, all right, at this time, present day. He wrote this book. I do not recommend this book for the common person because this is more of a scholarly high level book for training exorcisms. And unless you got a degree in theology or very knowledgeable in this subject, then this book would be a little bit over the head for most people to understand. He has lesser forms of this book that's smaller, easier to understand. You can look up his name on Amazon and see all of his books there. All right. But like I said, this book is specifically for like higher level type stuff. All right. So I wouldn't recommend that for people just learning out. He's got simpler books that are better for that. But I'm going to hear from a few priests, including him, speak on some topics. This one is the mortal sin is the door that opens the gateway to demonic activity in our lives and in our country.
Every mortal sin is an open door to possession. In fact, mortal sin by its nature takes the person out from underneath the authority structure of God and places the person underneath the authority structure of Satan. The proper effect of mortal sin is possession. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who commits a mortal sin becomes possessed, because even though the person opens the door, God is the one who determines whether the demon gets to step across the threshold. And so that means that by the mercy of God, most people who commit mortal sin do not become possessed. But the number of evil things that people are doing is opening up the door to demons getting more influence in this life. In a culture, in a society, and in our church, how powerful the demons are, therefore, is directly proportionate to the sanctity of the members of that culture or church. So it's not looking good. Most people in our culture are now whether they fully realize it or not is another matter, but most people in our culture and even in the church are leading habitual lives of mortal sin. And this means they're empowering the demons, and as a result of that, it's harder for us. This is something that after 1963, what used to take 1 to 2 days went to 8 months to 2 years to liberate the average person. Then
what he's saying, just to reiterate, so he started off by saying mortal sin is the doorway, the gateway for allowing demons into our life. And it is very, very easy to commit mortal sin. And we have to repent of that to get ourselves back in a straight relationship with Almighty God. All right. So that's a big thing. And he's basically saying that our world today, in our country, in our world, has become so anti-Christian and immoral that demons are getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and that the demon strength is a reflection of the morality of our country. As our country becomes less and less Christian or in line with God and relationship with God in our lives and in our society and in our government, that there's a correlation that the demons are giving more and more power and are taking over more and more. And in this last one, he's saying that the statistics are saying that what used to take a couple of days to get rid of a demon might now take 4 years. It's that bad. And that the priests are realizing their own strength is weaker and the demons are stronger, all because of the morality of the society. And because of our morality and our society's in a moral decline, that our power as exorcists are weakened and the demons are stronger, and it's only getting worse.
After 1963, what used to take 1 to 2 days went to 8 months to 2 years to liberate the average person. Then it's now on average 4 years to liberate somebody. One of the ways that we actually know that demons are becoming more powerful is we actually keep statistics in our community. Because I've been doing solemn exorcisms for 15 years, and I've been doing regular other exorcisms, minor exorcisms, for about 17 years. And so we started keeping statistics. And what we started to notice is that in relationship to possession, where demons actually possess people, the number of possessions is statistically remaining the same. It's 0.5% of the general population, 0.5%. So 1 out of every 200 people is likely possessed. And those people that come to us, it's about that same statistic. But statistically, when you're talking about diabolic obsession, that the amount of rates of diabolic obsession are drastically on the rise. When you talk to exorcists, what they're finding out is that the statistical number, the average, I polled several of the top exorcists in this country, And I asked them, what percentage of you do you think of the adult population in this country is diabolically obsessed, which I'll talk about in a minute. Every single one of us came up with the same statistic, 25%. Diabolic oppression is also on the rise, but for different causes. Diabolic oppression is also on the rise. We figure that the average number of people that are being diabolically oppressed is somewhere between 10 and 15% of the population is diabolically oppressed. It's an indicator that the diabolic influence is drastically increasing, and it's increasing for a variety of different reasons. It's increasing because people are doing a lot of evil things. Every mortal sin, this is something I tell people, every mortal sin is an open door to possession. In fact, mortal sin by its nature takes the person out from underneath the authority structure of God and places the person underneath the authority structure of Satan. The proper effect of mortal sin is possession. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody who commits a mortal sin becomes possessed, because even though the person opens the door, God is the one who determines whether the demon gets to step across the threshold. And so that means that by the mercy of God, most people who commit mortal sin do not become possessed. But the number of evil things that people are doing is opening up the door to demons getting more influence in this life. Then, of course, there's the increase in the occult. We're seeing this all over the place. The amount of occult material, the occult activity that's going is drastically on the increase. And as exorcists, we're seeing it across the board. The other thing that we're seeing is, when I first started doing exorcism, well, let's just back up. Before 1963, the average time to liberate someone from full possession was 1 to 2 days. Average time. After 1963, what used to take 1 to 2 days went to 8 months to 2 years to liberate the average person. Then it's now on average 4 years to liberate somebody. There's two reasons for that. One is because the world is much more evil and the demons are a lot more powerful. The second component is that exorcisms work what they call ex opere operantis ecclesiae. What does that mean? It means how holy the people are in the Catholic Church determines how effective my prayers are when I walk into session. That tells us that there's a fundamental problem with the members of the church. They're not as holy as their counterparts were in the past.
You cannot escape from me.
What's more powerful, an exorcism or a sacramental confession?
One confession is worth more than 1,000 exorcisms. We do exorcism only to get the person into the sacramental life of the church. Right? That's really the source of health. The 7 sacraments are the 7 ways Jesus Christ left to heal the world. They are the way that we receive God's very divinity within us.
Pio used to refer to it as the weapon. And it's actually, I think, if I remember right, we put that in our second stage of our protocol. We start telling them, okay, start saying the daily rosary. Before, we have a specific prayer life because we're looking for very specific patterns. But it's actually one of the most powerful weapons in relationship to spiritual warfare, or even just overcoming vice. They used to say if a person devoutly recites the rosary every day for a year, they'll either give up their mortal sin or the rosary.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'd like to share 2 things from...
Notice we're talking about the weapons and tools of exorcism, all right? On a major scale or minor scale, daily activity.
I'd like to share 2 things from 2 different exorcists. The first is still Father Ripperger, and the other is from Monsignor Stephen Rossetti, and it's about the Benedict medal.
But the St. Benedict medal is quite powerful. Now, there's a number of different ways that you can use St. Benedict medals, such as putting it at the entrance of each door and window to your home. We don't know why, but exorcists know that demons actually enter through, technically speaking, they don't enter through anything. They just apply their intellect or will wherever they want to, and that's what happens. But they very often talk about how demons will enter the home through the doors or through the windows. And so if you put them one over each of the windows, that'll actually help provide some protection. Also,
I put St. Michael and St. Benedict medals in my foundation of my house when I built it, and luckily no activity.
So an example of a binding prayer would be by the power of the precious blood, which is the one that almost all exorcists say you should start it with. So by the power of the precious blood, by the holy name of Jesus, because he said, by my name you will cast out demons. You can also put in things like, by the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary, St. Michael, etc. I command the demon of, and then you name the problem that you're having. So it's fear. I command the demon of fear to stop afflicting me, go to the foot of the cross, because ultimately they're Christ's slaves, so he determines what their disposition is. Go to the foot of the cross to receive your sentence. And if you do something as simple as that, a lot of times people will find it will just shut off.
Wow. Christian, you have real power in the spiritual realm, and you should use it.
That's brilliantly said, brilliantly put. Christian, you've got real power in the spiritual realm, and you need to learn that you are in a spiritual war. And you can't fight a war that you don't know you're in. So get straight, learn you're in the war, and learn the tools that are proven to work effectively in that. You know, whether you're Catholic or not. Now, he was talking about binding prayer, and he gave a typical exorcist and very good formula for binding prayer. You know, in the name of Jesus Christ, you're invoking the Lord, you're invoking the precious blood of Christ. But I want to quantify a little bit of what he's saying. He's telling you what he does, but again, as an average person or non-exorcist trying to perform a type of low-level exorcism is called deliverance. So say you have a friend or family member or someone you come in contact with in your circles who starts acting out, all right? And they're obviously possessed. I mean, they might even tell you that or say they're demons or whatever. They obviously these people need help. You need to be very careful in these situations, okay? In the Catholic Church, they always used to have deliverance teams that did a lot of prayer over people like that, but the church has kind of frowned upon that because people were getting hurt because they didn't understand what they were doing, all right? You have to have knowledge of what you're doing. And like I spoke earlier, where Father Michael Scanlon taught us, you have to know when you're dealing with crazy that you have the full power and authority of Christ to back you up. And the minute you start losing that confidence, you have to stop and remove yourself from the situation because that is a time you can get hurt. Okay. So that's one rule. Another rule is this: the purpose of a priest performing an exorcism in lieu of the church, that's because you have a person that has lost all self-will. They've lost all their self-will. The demon has taken over this person. This person no longer has a right to being self-possessed because they've given it up in one form or another. Okay? Like addiction. An addiction is the loss of self-will, the self-control and power over your body, your mind. All right? And that can lead easily to possession. All right? Now, when a person is possessed, they've lost their free will. They've lost their right to self-possession. Therefore, that person can't free themselves. They're a slave, literally. They've given up their will through sin, through immorality, through open doorways. They've given authority over to the demons to take control of them. So the purpose of the exorcist is the church steps in with the binding authority of Christ in the name of the church, in the name of Christ, takes authority over the body and forces the demon out to give self-possession back to the individual. All right? That's the process. That's what it is. Now, the priest with the authority of the church has the power and authority to do that. An exorcist, with the local bishop's permission, has the authority to do that. The average person does not have that authority or power. And if you try, you don't know what you're doing, and I'll tell you the tricks of what to do in just a second. But if you try to do that and you don't know what you're doing, you can get seriously hurt. It's not a game. This is a war. It is a battle. It's mostly mental, but it can also be part physical. And you have to be very careful or you can get very hurt. All right. It's a warning. Now, there are tricks to the game, and I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that in just a minute. Again, I will say there are some people, rare, but some people who just have gifts of exorcism. Now, they are in their own class. Don't think you can be them. They actually have an anointing of God to be able to do what they do. I know some Protestant ministers who do a fantastic job of exorcising demons and have done so for many years, you know. But that's rare. It's rare. An average layperson could have a gift of that, but again, it's rare. Um, a super holy person could have a gift of that, but again, it's rare. So best to stay away from trying to do too much. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't do deliverance. Now, I'm going to give you the cheat sheet. I'm going to give you the way to properly do it here, and it's simple. It's simple, but like I said, demons are very, very legalistic. They have to be, because God binds them in laws. But they will do anything they can to subvert those laws. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile. All right. So let me give you an example. If you're doing a deliverance, all right, first of all, most acting out is usually oppression, obsession. It's not often possession. If someone is a true level possession, like the Exorcism of Emily Rose, or the story that inspired the Exorcist movie, you need a high level professional to deal with that, and that you need to go to a trained official exorcist to handle. But those are very rare cases. That level is very rare. For Doesn't mean people aren't possessed, but for them to act out at that way is very rare. Okay. And every once in a while it happens, you know, but it is very rare. That said, most people dealing with addiction and other things that aren't quite at that level yet, they will need prayer, especially at the obsession level where they can start acting out, even though they're not fully possessed yet, right? Like many stories I've told you about tonight already. So here's the kicker with that. If you don't have an exorcist, a professionally trained exorcist on hand, this is what you do. See, an exorcist will say, I bind you in the name of, all right? There's the kicker. The priest has the anointing of God to be able to say, I bind you in the name of Christ. We, as lay people, don't have that authority, and you cannot say that. You cannot bind. Now, here's one kicker. Let me make a distinction. It's a little confusing, but not too much. I have a right to full possession of myself and my body. So I have full right to bind any demonic activity in me or around me trying to affect me. I have full right to bind that in the name of Christ with his precious blood, and send and cancel their assignment, remove their permission and authorities, and you bind them and cast them out in the name of Jesus Christ and by his precious blood, and you send them to the foot of the cross. All right, you see what I'm saying? That's how you have every right to bind anything in yourself. Now, to take that a step further, if you are a parent, you have a right over your wife and your children or anything in your house. You have a right to bind that and break it and cast it out, removing its assignment, canceling its permissions and authorities to be there. You have a right over your wife, over your children, to bind and cancel, and on your property to bind, cancel. That includes curses. You can break curses by invoking the precious blood of Jesus Christ for yourself, for your family, your immediate family, that is, like that live in your household, that you have charge over. All right, that you have authority over as the father of the household before God. You see what I'm saying? You do not have the right over a guest in your house. You can ask the guest to leave, and you also need to be careful what guests you invite in your house, because you don't want to bring that crap in. Them. Sometimes you can open yourself up by inviting the guest in who's carrying that crap with them. You do not have the right over another person. And as far as your children, you only have a right over them as their kids. Once they kind of reach adolescence, they're starting to become adults and individuals, and they start bucking against the system. You're starting to lose your rights at that point. But how do you deal with another person? Say it's your older child, adolescent age, or another person in your house or in your group, and someone's acting out and they need deliverance prayers, instead of saying, I bind in the name of Christ, which you cannot do. You can only do that for yourself and your immediate family. But what you can do is you talk that, because that person has the right of self-possession, you talk them through it. You coach them. You tell them to say they bind this in the name of Jesus with the precious blood of Christ, and to remove their permissions and their authorities and break their assignment and cast them out and send them to the foot of the cross in the name of Jesus Christ, and the power of the Holy Spirit. You know what I'm saying? You can coach them to take possession over themselves. That's what you do. You don't try to bind another person's entity in the deliverance. You coach that person if they're willing, and most are, unlike the unfortunate case of that kid we had to kick out of my university, but most are willing. Even if they open themselves up to this, they get scared. They want nothing to do with this. All right. So most are willing to get rid of this stuff. So you coach them, you tell them to bind it in the name of Christ and the precious blood, and you just coach them. All right. Now, if they're not in a position where they can be coached, maybe they're not even coherent or they're not there because they're just kind of, wigging out, then you still can't bind for them. But what you do is you say, that's fine. You just start calling on Jesus and you ask Jesus to do it. You ask St. Michael, you ask the holy angels, you ask the saints of heaven. Yes, but of course, Jesus, the greatest with that, and the precious blood, you ask him to come and do it. Ask St. Michael, his chief soldier, his chief warrior, who's in charge of protecting humanity against the devils. All right. That's why he's so effective. All right. So you can't bind, but you just invoke God to do it. And God understands the situation. He will answer to that. Sometimes more and less, depending on his will and his purpose in a certain matter. We don't always understand God's reason and why he chooses to do some things or not. Heal some people, not others, that seem deserving, even more so or whatever. But that's the key. You can bind anything in yourself. You can bind anything in your immediate family, in your household, to a certain age. All right. But when it comes to other people, you don't bind them, but you coach them to bind things in themselves. And you coach them through that process. And if that doesn't work, if they're not in a coherent state, then you just sit there and pray and call on the power of Jesus and his precious blood and the Holy Spirit. And you just do it that way. And it's very effective. All right. And holy water, crucifixes are all blessed crucifixes by a priest. They're very effective. They're very regular water is not holy water. A priest has to bless it, and then it becomes a sacramental, and it is very effective, proven for centuries. This stuff, including the Benedictine metal, the holy salt, and blessed salt, and a blessed holy rosary. These things have been proven to be very powerful. Whether you believe in them or not, they've been proven to be super powerful against demonic forces. So that's the key on deliverance, and take note of it. Tell people about it. It will keep you out of trouble. You will be able to accomplish what you need to or want to accomplish, but you do it in a safer way. And again, like Father Michael Scanlon taught, you always, even in those situations, you always, even that sometimes they can be scary. You always have to have the confidence that you're speaking with in the authority of Christ, even when you're telling them to take the bind on themselves. You're coaching them. You still have to have that confidence that Christ is there working through you and is protecting you. Because like I said, once you start losing that confidence, it's time to stop and get out. You can always take a break and reset and come back to it, or get someone to take your place. And it's good in deliverances to have multiple people. Even remember the scriptures say where, a few are gathered in my name, I am there, physically present. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm there. So it's always good to have numbers to pray over people, and it keeps you safer. just like the football team over that little 90-pound seminarian. It took all of them to hold this kid down with a knife. And he wasn't swinging a knife around for no reason. I mean, he was trying to stab these people. All right. And it took a whole team of football players to hold this 190-pound kid down. Okay. All right. One last thing I want to show here.
One of the worst cases I've ever heard was from the Exorcist of New York City. The woman, a young girl, Juilliard, a violinist, and she was about to graduate. She was brilliantly talented, but all of her friends were getting job offers and she had none. And her friends remember always hearing her say the words, "I would do anything to be famous." Well, guess who's listening? It wasn't long after that she went to bed one night, had a dream, and she said in the dream was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen, naked, another sign, calling card of the devil. And he said, "You really want fame and power?" And she said, "I do." And he produced a contract, and he took his finger and slashed her finger and had her sign it in her blood. And then he touched the contract and it burst into flames and the ashes fell on the floor. So pretty easy to understand what happened, right? But what's worse is her finger was cut and the ashes were next to the bed. So within a couple of weeks, she signs this multinational tour, makes a ton of money, becomes very popular and famous on this circuit. And within a few years, she gets involved with drugs, goes to needles, gets HIV. Now she's dying in a New York hospital. And this whole thing comes back to how this started. And she calls her Filipino mother and tells her the story. And mommy calls the chancery. "I need an exorcist right away for my daughter." So Jim is the exorcist. He shows up and they tell him the whole story from the dream forward. And he says, "Okay, well, that's not good. You signed a blood covenant with the devil. So I'm going to need you to break that with the blood covenant. So you're going to write out the whole creed and then you're going to sign it in your blood." Well, the doctor's like, "She has AIDS. She's not signing anything in blood. Not going to happen." And he says, "Well, then you need to step out of the room because she needs to do this." And she did do it. And she signed the contract, the creed, and she convulses and flatlines and dies. So now the doctor comes back and he's really upset. The mother is out of her mind. They're all blaming the priest. Hysteria goes on for about 10 minutes. And then all of a sudden she jumps up off the table. She's back. And they test her. No HIV, no AIDS. She's completely healed. She then committed for the rest of her life to only do music that would honor God and to tell people about the reality of the devil and not to make deals with him.
Don't make deals with the devil. You will always get the short end of the stick. And another thing is crazy. I mean, you do a YouTube search on how many rappers or singers or pop stars that have sold their soul to the devil. It's insane. It's insane. All right. Yeah, Katy Perry openly said multiple occasions that she sold her soul to the devil. That she started off as a Christian singer, wasn't getting anywhere, made a deal with the devil, boom, she's famous. And you see her morality's gone, skydived, did burned and crashed, right? Even Taylor Swift, look at all the Swifties. I mean, her concerts are becoming more and more look like witch covens. It's crazy, some of the witchcraft stuff that goes on with her stuff. And I love that girl. She used to be such a sweet, innocent little girl. And now George Soros, who's a popular name many people know on here, very evil character, bought out all her records, bought out the rights to all her material. And then overnight, she switched from that point. She kind of made a deal with the devil, and she went from being a good, clean-cut little girl to being this witch. And now she publicly calls herself a Christian, but says that Christians support abortion. No, they do not. I'm sorry to tell you. I don't care what your stance is on the subject. If you commit abortion, you're cutting yourself off from God if you do not seriously repent from that. That is one of the ways to lose God's relationship with God and getting into heaven with God. It's murder. It's murder. And it's murder of the innocents is what it is. It used to be back in the day before we had contraception, People were prepared. If they did the deed, they might be paying for raising a child. They were prepared for that. Now, with contraception and abortion, oh, it's a mistake and it's something to be gotten rid of because it's convenient to us and we don't have to take responsibility for our actions. No, wrong. It is a soul of Almighty God and it is committing murder. It's committing murder. And people want to talk about like incest and rape, but that is so small of a point. On the scale. But you know what? There's many public speakers out there that'll tell you today that they're the product of incest and rape, and yet God made them bless their lives extremely and healed their families and all kinds of stuff. You you never go wrong by making the right decisions. You'll be punished by society for making the right decisions. A lot of times the right decision is harder to do, but you'll never be wrong with God for doing something that's right. um and that's the beauty of it. And yet to the evil side, they always say the ends justify the means. That's evil. That's wrong. It does not. It does not. So yeah, pop stars and all that, you've got to be real careful of that. Even the rap business, they tell you it's all involves satanic deals and higher level crazy stuff, and the stuff that they have to do to get success. But even actors in Hollywood and all the stuff they do in these occult rituals to get fame and all this, it doesn't mean it's all of them, but there is a large majority of them that's the role and that's the case. I mean, we can see this. I mean, Hollywood and entertainment is gone just completely dark. Just like Disney doing this whole diversity inclusion stuff. They all claim it's for social justice and a beautiful thing. That's not. What they're doing is evil. They're taking they're taking they're taking the biggest names of products that we've grown up on, like Star Wars and comic books like the MCU and the X-Men, right? They're taking things that were good and wholesome for multiple generations, and they're just trying to force their own agendas into it, all while they say, oh, we're not forcing any agenda, when that's all they're doing is forcing agenda, while they're lying and saying they're not forcing agenda. And that's why these movies are tanking now and doing horrible, because they're not made for entertainment. They're not made for the fans. They're not made for the stories that the creators created them to be. They're just trying to use them to push agenda, and that fails, and it's trash, and that's why it's all failing and people don't like it. But one last point I wanted to make is back again to the exorcism of Emily Rose. All right. In the story of the exorcism of Emily Rose, she was a good person. She was a holy person, and yet she got fully possessed in a dark way. Finally, in the course of her possession and exorcism, the Lord came to her and spoke to her and said, listen, if you ask me, I will snap my fingers and I will make all of this stop right now, and it'll never happen to you again. However, I give you a choice. If you decide to keep the possession, it will take your life. You will die from this, but you will help to save many other souls. And the woman who played Emily Rose, Annalise Michelle, she told the Lord, I choose to keep the possession and die from it so that other people can be saved. That's a saint. That's a saint. That's what it is to be a saint. A saint is someone, see, Jesus came to this earth to die, to take up our sins upon himself so that we may be saved. And God, whether people want to acknowledge this or not, God sometimes gives us the ability to share, a small share but a share nonetheless in following in the footsteps of Jesus Christ. The scripture says there's no greater love than someone who's willing to lay down their life for the sake of the kingdom. So when we follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, that's how you become a saint. And look, in the darkness of our world today, I'll tell you this, and I'll do another show sometime where someone asks in the comments they want to hear a show where I share my own personal conversion, and I'll share that sometime. But also, I'll share the stories that the Lord told me and the prophecies that He's given me, which is part of the reason why I do this show. And I don't do this for fame or make money or any of that stuff. I mean, really, it's a burden. It takes a lot of work and it's hard. But I do it because I believe it's a mission, and I try to do it in an entertaining way, but I try to get the message across nonetheless. And what the Lord told me is in the near future, the United States is going to be destroyed, and it's His will that it's destroyed. He says it will be destroyed forever, and it'll rebuild, but it will never be America again. That will be gone. And the majority of people won't make it. And that's hard for me because I'm a patriot and I love my country. I love God and I love my country. I love my country people, even though we've turned away from God. Even many churches, sadly to say, but it's true. Even in the Catholic Church, I think Francis is not a good person. I don't like him at all. But anyway, I'm getting off track a little bit. What I'm trying to say is, oh, and the Lord told me the reason the U.S. is going to be destroyed and the reason it's His will is because of the sin of abortion above any other sin. He's like, regardless of any other sin in our country, and there are many, the Lord said abortion has sealed the fate of the United States. And He said He gave us the chance that it could be averted, but He says at this point, there's nothing that's possible for humanity to do to change what's getting ready to happen. Nothing. But, oh, and that reminds me of Mother Teresa Calcutta. One time when Mother Teresa Calcutta was winning her acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize, she stood up there and she said, the fruit of abortion is nuclear war. The fruit of abortion is nuclear war. That was not a statement, that was a prophecy. Mother Teresa of Calcutta was given a prophecy to the human race, to America, that we were going to end in a nuclear war. The Lord told me that when it happens, it'll be a day that no one expects. It'll be a normal day where people are having weddings and everything else. And He said the country will fall in one single day. He calls it an hour. He calls it an hour, but it's a day, one single day. And He said you'll wake up the next day and it won't be the same country anymore. It'll be very different. And all the luxuries we're used to, all gone. Freedom, liberty, gone. Rights, gone. Food, probably gone. He said, and one thing He told me another time was there's nothing in your entire life that can prepare you for what time will be like at that time, meaning it'll be miserable. He said that the living will envy the dead. It'll be that bad. But He also said, but those who live in such times will live out. Now, from a Catholic standpoint, we have purgatory. He says they will fulfill their purgatory on earth so that when they die, they go straight to heaven. All right. The concept of purgatory is God gives us a gift that when you die, you can't go immediately into His presence because He's pure and holy. And we're still, even if you're a good, holy person, we still have debt to pay for in sin. And so we have a means that God's given us in purgatory to pay that debt, and then we go to heaven. but it's still a great place because everyone there goes to heaven. So, but another thing the Lord said was, the country's going to fall. That's nothing we can control. That's His will. It's going to happen. Promise you, it's going to happen. That said, God said this: our hope is, as Christians, is not in this world. It's not in this world. Our hope is only in getting to heaven. That's our only purpose. If you fail to get to heaven, you have failed your life. You have failed the reason you were born. You have failed your existence. You have failed humanity, and you have failed yourself. If you make it to heaven, then you discover the purpose of what this life was. It's that simple. And it's by your own free will. And God is the good judge. Jesus is the good judge. He knows every thought, every experience in our life, and He takes all of that into consideration. But at the end of the day, we choose whether we go to heaven or to hell. And it's based on our choices in our life. Did we choose God? Did we put God first in our lives? Did we say we put God first in our lives, or did we actually put God first in our lives? Because that's a world of difference right there. World of difference. The Last Thing by Emily Rose. Oh, the Lord also said this: so the most important thing is our hope is not in this world. It doesn't matter ultimately if our country falls, if we lose our family, our job, our house, everything. What matters is, do we get into eternity with God, where this life will only seem like the blink of an eye, and there will be no more pain? Think eternity to what, like 80 years in this life? You know what I'm saying? And this isn't even living, that's living. You know what I mean? So the point is, as Christians, our home is not in this world. Our home is in heaven with Jesus and our family. And you know who that family is? It's not just your blood. You're going to find when you get to heaven that Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. All children created by God are your brothers and sisters as much as your kin and flesh. In fact, Jesus says that which is spirit, that which is flesh, that which is spirit is greater than that which is flesh. All right. So God says we need to focus on not this world, not the joys or desires or wants of this world, but in the desire of getting to heaven, and whatever it takes to do that, and to teach our children that. It doesn't matter if our children are slaughtered and tortured in martyrdom. What matters is, where do they go after? Do they go to heaven for eternity? Because if so, it will all have been worth it here. All of it. Where Jesus wipes those tears away and there's no suffering anymore. So, all it takes is going up. All right, that's the first thing. The second thing, there are still many, many, many souls out there that we can help get to heaven through our efforts. That's what our focus has got to be. Not on what happens to America, not what happens to me, but that I do what it takes to draw close to God, get in relationship with God, clean myself up, and get to heaven, and to try to get as many other of my brothers and sisters there as well, to steal back the spoils from the devil and bring them over to Christ. That's it. Last thing on Emily Rose, one of the favorite statements, it's a true statement from her that I wanted to say, is this. She said this. She says, how can people not believe in God when I show them that the devil is real? How can people not believe in God when I show them the devil is real? So on that note, God bless everybody. Please keep me in your prayers. And I I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. A little bit different, but that's how I am. Multi topics, and I think this is a good one to cover. A lot of people are interested in it, and it's a lot of good information that I think can help people in dealing. And we're in a time where more and more demonic activities happen, and we need more deliverance prayer. So I've given you some of the keys to help from that's come from centuries of practice and use that work and are effective. You know, just be careful. Some of the things I coached on how to do it can help. If you ever have to experience or deal with this in your life, and you may with the level of demonic activity that's going on in the world today. So God bless all y'all. I hope everyone's doing well. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any stories, especially Dogman stories are my favorite, and the audiences, then please contact me. There's a few people that reached out. I try to get back to them, and we're crossing channels and haven't been able to get in touch yet. So if you have stories, hey, you guys make this show what it is. If you got suggestions for topics, if it's something I have any knowledge about, I'll cover it, or if I can present it well. Otherwise, I'll leave it up to other hosts. But especially if you've got stories and stuff that especially Dogman, or you know people that got Dogman stories, send them my way. I love that stuff. And that's all part of this too. It's all part of this, as I'll expand on more in the future. But anyway, thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good night. And please keep the lights on.